album of all time.
Yeah. So what was your favorite album of all time? David, do you have one?
I know the exact
Okay.
song. I don't know the name, so I'm gonna look it up right
Yeah, I
now.
gotta grab my name too. I asked the
That's
question, but I couldn't figure out the
crazy.
name. But I know who it is. I know who it is. I know what album it is.
I'm a
I
big
gotta.
Queen greatest hits album kind of guy, you know, just
That's what you're gonna go with. You're gonna cop out.
no, absolutely not. I
All
gotta think about this too. Now you have me on the spot. I gotta think about. Actually,
right, I got mine.
all right.
Mine's
Well,
pretty simple.
David, what do you have?
All right, so my favorite album of all time is 2014 Forest Hills Drive by J. Cole.
It's actually one of mine too.
No misses on that one. I love J. Cole, so that's kind of it. Just makes sense.
I agree with that. All right, Ben, what do we got?
Mine is gonna be Room for Squares. It was a 2001 album, a little bit before my time. It was John Mayer's like hit album, the one that brought him out.
Oh,
There's some
okay.
good songs in that on that album. If you're ever in your feels,
Okay.
I think I'm gonna go with that one. Yeah,
I have
Dang, that's a deep cut. I like that.
I have a funny story
100%.
about that album actually. So my mom actually
Really?
worked at a radio station in Jacksonville. She worked for WPE at that time. It was about that time. And back in the day to sell your stuff on the radio, you would actually have to go and perform to the radio station. That's how you got out there. That's how you got your name out there. Well, my mom, who was literally just like an accountant, got sat in a room with two other women and John Mayer. And John Mayer played like four songs from that album to actually sell it to get on the radio station. So
Wow.
yeah,
Oh, I
that's
love that. What a story.
that is
Yeah,
the
that's awesome.
back in the day how you used to get sold on the radio. So that's
Yeah. Now you
um
just throw it up on TikTok and you're good.
yeah, right. Just let it blow up and it's home free. Special guest this week, Benjamin Kerr from the or sorry, oh my god, I need to already like mess up my entire life. Um Benjamin Kerr,
Cure,
Cure?
Cure, see, as in the Cure person. So yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
got it. Regardless, great story so far. Young gentleman from Miami, American Cuban, if I am not mistaken. So if I am wrong with that, you can get mad at me about that as well. Youngest MLS reporter at the age of 19, digital host for Miami CF. That is so cool. I greatly appreciate you jumping on. Also, it was a Kidcaster from Miami Heat. Lots of great stories that I know you have, and we're excited to have you. So thank you so much, Benjamin. Do you like to go by Benjamin or Ben while we have this on?
my friends call me Ben, so feel free to.
Awesome.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. I actually wanted to ask, how early did you start? Because I was looking at your stuff and I looked, and I think as far back as I can see was I want to say 2017 is where
Yeah,
is like the
2016 was the first time that I ever picked up a microphone with the intention of like being a sports broadcaster. It started summer of 2016. I was going into the 7th grade in middle school. And it was really a turning point for me because since I was really young, like we're talking probably 6 or 7, just like any other young boy out there, I was a big time sports fan. Loved basketball. I'm from Miami, so I lived through that Miami Heat era with LeBron James, like the most magical 4 years in sports history in my lifetime here in Miami. And, the Dolphins were never really great, but they always had a good history that you always heard about from, older fans and whatnot. And the Marlins had history like when I was really young, like the year I was born. They won a World Series in
2002,
2003. They won in 2001. But they were always blowing up the team. And a funny story there, I always think back to those Marlins teams that had Yelich, Stanton, Ozuna, Jose Fernandez, rest in peace. And I think, and it's one of those things that in retrospect, I look back on, it's like, I'm going to have a tough time explaining to my kids one day how that team didn't even sniff a World Series because there was so much talent down here in Miami. And it feels like it's almost a curse. We have had amazing talent over the years in different sports that just doesn't pan out here. They go somewhere else and they figure it out. Ryan Tannehill, although he's not necessarily a Super Bowl caliber quarterback, left us, went to the Titans, has been pretty formidable, got a huge contract and a contract year, beat out Tom Brady, who was like the arch nemesis for Dolphins fans. Just so weird how we have seemingly found talent. We just haven't known how to grow it or cultivate it. So going back to like the kind of origin story, 12 years old, summer of 2016, I picked up a microphone and I decided I was going to start doing sideline reports for my middle school games, my JV games, my high school games at the time, because I was part of a middle school that had a high school attached to it. And I loved sports. So I was playing football that year. It was part of a club. and I knew that I wanted to be involved in sports. I played tackle football, never saw a meaningful snap in a game. I think I went into the game one time, but I loved sports. And it was like that time for me where I was like, it was go big or go home. I knew I wanted to be involved in sports in some way, shape, or form. I knew I had the self-awareness early on to know a 5'7" kid who's 125 pounds soaking wet is not going to be a professional athlete. And so I knew I wasn't going to make it on the field as an athlete wearing pads, but I wanted to be involved in it because to me, sports is so awesome. It's so passionate. It's got this magical aura to it. Some of the best moments for people, for fans, is in sports. It takes you away from work, takes you away from the everyday grind. And so I knew I wanted to be a part of that. And so I decided that I was going to, try my craft in numerous different things. So I was a sideline reporter. I was in the booth commentator for my school. I took on interviews and packages at the school and outside of there. And then at the end of that 7th grade year when I started, I really capped it off with, I think, what is my crown jewel, which is my 30-minute interview with Alex A-Rod Rodriguez. It was a sit-down interview with the former Yankee third baseman. And that interview went mega viral. It was picked up by a lot of different articles and news outlets nearby me. I even had a local news station reach out to my family, and they followed me around school for the day. It was a big deal. And I got to sit down with Alex Rodriguez in a time when it felt like he was starting to turn into he was entering this new chapter of his life. He was starting in broadcasting with Fox Sports. He was just starting to date Jennifer Lopez at the time, which was huge news outside of sports. It almost felt like it had this Taylor Swift, Travis Kelce energy surrounding it, where pop culture and sports collided in just this insanely viral way. And it was a really cool time when he wasn't really speaking to people in a long form interview, because it felt like, on the outside looking in, so many people had done him wrong and maybe portrayed him in a really negative light. I think I put a new spin on it. I was fresh. I asked him hard-hitting questions, but I was also I think I was also very friendly and open and non-judgmental in my approach. And I think that's what made the interview so good. And that really closed off my first year in sports broadcasting. And a lot of stuff happened in between there. But I just think that would probably be the year 2016 where I really started my journey into this sports broadcasting world.
I mean, to be a young kid and say, like, hey, listen, your first large interview is going to be with one of the greatest third basemen, shortstops to play MLB, is pretty substantial and pretty amazing. So congrats on that. That's insane, especially just to get into this and to be at such a young age and have that mentality of like, all right, I can sit down and I can have this conversation. I can have these tough these tough questions, because when you have an athlete of that caliber and they're sitting down with someone younger or someone that's new, right? They don't expect to actually have this conversation that's going to be meaningful. It's going to be the fluff interview, right? The save face interview. But if you're going to sit down with them and press him, it's a whole different ballgame, and they have to adjust to that just like a competitor would. So I got to applaud you on that. That's amazing.
I appreciate it. And I think, looking back, and it's something that I even try to maintain now when I do the show, is the importance of respecting the athletes. And I know that, I grew up in a culture where Stephen A. Smith, Skip Bayless, I'm not saying they disrespected athletes, because I'm going to be honest, I love both to death. They made sports TV so fun and exciting to watch for so many years, even if people didn't always agree with their takes. But to me, those guys, it started this stigma of, unfortunately, separating the media from the actual athlete. And that was a weird position, because in the beginning, and I wasn't necessarily around for the beginning during the Bob Costas days, but you love to see those dugout interviews. You love to see those sideline interviews. You love to see players having fun on the mic and building this almost instant chemistry with reporters on the sideline, on the pitch, whatever the case may be. And now that we've kind of moved into an era that is very clicks-based, very clips-based, unfortunately, sometimes chaos sells and sometimes negative storylines sell. And I always try to make sure that I'm never too critical of a player or too critical of an athlete. And I always want to make sure to check myself. And that was one of those situations where I think that A-Rod interview, it was important, and I didn't even realize it then looking back. It was important to show that respect to someone who a lot of people were disrespecting at the time. And I think that's the reason that I was able to land the interview, conduct it so efficiently. And I think it's one of the reasons why, till this day, Alex and I follow each other on Instagram. And I'd like to say that relationship has maintained its strength throughout the years, even though that interview was already, 4 or 5 years ago now, we're in 2023. It took place in 2017. So I think that's also always really important, is make sure that with those level of athletes, no matter what they've gone through, what the public perception of them is, make sure the respect is always there. And I'm glad that I kept it in that moment. I was from Miami. I understood a lot of his story, a lot of his backstory. I found it relatable at the time in many different ways. And I think he saw that. And yeah, just maintaining that respect, I think, is so important in everything I do. And I try to make sure that I lead with that, even with the takes that I do now, that sometimes are pretty critical of players and teams.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that completely. And like, I think sometimes even Chandler and I are like, we try and check ourselves, or at least like, give some benefit of the doubt for even coaches, like just like kind of, knowing that the job, having played the game and knowing that the job is not easy by any means, but like still trying to remain objective and give objective criticism rather than just like, ripping into a guy. But anyways, I won't ramble on anymore. I just wanted to know, like, you were talking about kind of, get not being too much into the clicks and kind of just trying to get clips and go viral on your stance. So how do you keep yourself, how do you check yourself in a way to make sure that you're not going too far over the line, but still giving entertainment and doing a good job at your work?
I think sometimes when you're on camera, especially for a long period of time, the show that I do now, the Benjamin Cure Show, is live on YouTube every Monday at 6 p.m. And it went from being 20 minutes long to 30 minutes long. Now it's like 45 minutes long. No commercials, no ad reads, no nothing. And so when you're rolling on air, and I'm sure you guys have noticed this too, more of you starts to come out, which is good. You want to be your authentic self. But by the same token, sometimes you'll think of something and you'll be like, man, they're bad on third down. They're not doing well in the red zone. This coach had bad clock management, and it starts to come out very
The fan
raw.
comes out.
This team is, this team is just not good. And so I think sometimes the most important part in not trying to go after clicks or in checking yourself is actually the time off camera. It's when you sign off, it's when you log off and you say, okay, I'll see you guys next Monday. And you realize, you know what, just like an athlete, I think it's important, watch film. We may not be on the field or like running routes or trying to make sure that we know all the right reads, but I think it really is important. And people in our industry sometimes, like growing up, they would always tell me, on-air talent especially, I don't like watching myself back. I'm kind of embarrassed. And you hate when you hear all those stutters. To me, from day one, when I listened to myself back and I would stutter, and I still do, and I would mess up, or you'd say something that, it wasn't really going anywhere, like it was a blank thought, and as you're on camera, you're just trying to think this take out. I always think it's important to see those moments, to see where you went wrong from like a broadcasting on-air talent perspective, but also as like a fan and as a human being. Like, was I a little bit too critical of this athlete? Because they do have jobs as well, and they are going home to circumstances that we don't know about, and not everything is all football in their lives. And sometimes things happen, and we're not a perfect human being 17 weeks out of the year for 3 hours a day at any given point. Why do we expect them to be? And so I think the most important way that I learned to check myself is really watch the tape back. What was I a little too critical? What was I saying? Was I wrong? Was I being a little bit biased? And I've always thought that it's good to watch yourself back and make sure you're not too critical. And by the same token, I think you learn a lot about yourself as an on-air talent when you do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Being able to laugh at yourself is important. And what's great in podcast form or just talking form, more catered to rather doing a show, a late night show, or even doing a broadcast during the game. The stutters, personally, I feel like are involved. They are important, right? Because it shows that we have this human emotion. If you watch Stephen A, if you watch Skip Bayless, you don't know what they're saying half the time because they're trying to get it out because they're so passionate about it, right? So being able to have those breaks and like show your passion, but at the same time show your respect for that same sport, right? We all love football. We all love sports. We're all competitive. And with our friends, we are arguing, we're yelling, we're obnoxious, right? But being able to condense that into a short period, have that come out and really understand the sport, and being able to push your point across with actual facts and examples rather than just going, yo, Julio Jones just signed with the Philadelphia Eagles. They're amazing now. There's nothing to that, right? You have to be able to
There's no context, there's no stats, there's no facts.
Yeah, so being able to curate that in a way to actually have a conversation is what's really important. And I think in podcast form and being able to talk it out makes it good. Like when you're able to sit down and hang out, especially in the world of 2023, when you're able to just jump on and be virtual, right? I mean, we can have these conversations. So, I mean, kind of like what we were talking about before the podcast, what were some times where you have caught your humility and kind of had to check yourself and show that? Because I know we got into that a little bit before.
So I've said this a lot lately on the show, and it's like it's almost something that I want to live by, especially going into 2023. I started the Benjamin Cure show about a year ago, and speaking, this kind of ties into the last question too, in terms of like not doing it for clicks. The first 3-4 months of the show, I was only putting out the YouTube show. I was till this day I edited it myself. The production quality's always gotten better, but it certainly didn't start there. It started with an old camera, an old mic from Barnes and Noble, and things have gone getting better. And I've got a tripod right over there, and I've got my mic there that's a little bit better, and I've got a newer camera in the last year. But I started originally, and I told myself, if nobody watches this, I am totally fine with it. If this never gets picked up at any point, if this show doesn't go anywhere, I'm okay with it. I know that the reps are going to make me better. So for the first 3 or 4 months, I didn't have a Twitter or a TikTok or an Instagram account for the show. I started about 4 months later when I said, you know what? I understand in 2023, a lot of people aren't going to watch the long form show. That's the way it works. Whether you're getting 1 view, 10 views, 100 views, that's a lot on YouTube when you're starting out. But the TikTok clips and the way that algorithm is structured, which I think is awesome for creators, and things like Instagram Reels, it's going to get out there if you want it to. And so I didn't start pushing my takes or my content out there until well into the show. And I think that also helped with you're not doing this for clicks, Ben. You're not looking at the bottom of the meter on YouTube to say after a week, this video has 100 views or 200. You're just doing it to see how much better you can get. And then I think now when it comes to checking myself, I like to do this all the time. I'd rather be, I say this a lot, I'd rather be late to the party, but be right than be the first one there and be wrong. And you see that a lot with hot takes. And every once in a while, I'll fall victim to it. A couple weeks ago, I made a take about Matthew Stafford and the Rams preseason and how I just thought things weren't building up to be successful for them this year. I didn't see it. McVay was considering retiring, going into the TV booth. Stafford with a neck injury. There were some conversations that he would refuse to restructure his contract. Cooper Kupp, injury riddled for the past couple months, happened again to him in training camp. Aaron Donald getting older, losing Jalen Ramsey because they decided to trade him in the offseason. I went on this whole spiel and I said, I just don't expect the Rams to be able to compete in their own division. I don't think they'd beat a team like the Seattle Seahawks or the 49ers. And then I had an interesting opportunity about a week or two into the season when they played the Seattle Seahawks early in the year and they beat them. And I watched that take back and I was like, you know what? This is an excellent opportunity to not only tell myself I was wrong, but kind of share this, make some content out of it. And so I did almost like a meme compilation of me with the music in the background, the Larry David music of pretty much reciting that take and then inserting clips of Matthew Stafford absolutely killing it, throwing for over 300 yards. The box score from that game, the Rams beating the Seahawks after I said there was no chance they would this year. And I think just taking opportunities like that where, you know what, you're going to be wrong. It's part of the nature of it. You should probably embrace that. It would be boring if we on podcasts, on cable TV, whatever the case may be, we're always right about everything. If you expect everything that's going to happen, there's no excitement. There's no point in watching the games. And the best part about this whole area in sports broadcasting, we like being on the mic, right? But we also love watching the games. And so that excitement of not knowing what's going to happen until kickoff and until that final whistle and understanding that and kind of embracing it, I'm always going to be willing to admit when I'm wrong. And I'll be the first one to tell my audience that. And I think they appreciate it. I think under that take, whether it was on YouTube Shorts or on TikTok, I had a lot of people tell me, and I keep on getting texts about that same post, which was already 3 weeks ago. Now I keep on getting texts about it from people that I know who are just seeing it now, who it's just ending up on their For You page and comments under it saying, hey, I appreciate the fact that you're willing to admit that you're wrong, because there's a lot of creators out there that would double down and, they're married to the take. And we all know those creators out there who are they're going to stick with it. I don't think that's authentic. I don't think people care for watching that. I think sometimes it seems a little bit two-faced. I know I'm wrong. You know I'm wrong. Let's just put it out there and laugh about it. And that's kind of the way that I see it.
Yeah, and to be
Absolutely.
fair, to give you some credit, no one really thought the Rams were going to be great this year. So
Yeah,
they are
I
one of the
think
most
we were all on that.
surprising
Yeah.
teams of the league this year, and that's actually one thing we said last week was that like it was surprising what the Rams have done. So with that, you have that blanket. David, you have a question?
Yeah, no, not even a question, just kind of a comment on that. Cause like we do a bunch of like, takes on what's going on in the NFL. We do some betting, we do some like just picks in general. And so like we always have little small takes where Chandler, even I think like 2 weeks ago, was like, oh, the Chiefs are gonna absolutely destroy the
Chicago Bears.
Chicago Bears. And I was like, oh, that's crazy. There's no way. Like that's probably not gonna happen. Lo and behold, they absolutely destroyed the Chicago Bears because it is what it is right now for them. And so you watch it back and you're like, oh man, yeah, that's just one of those things that like you can't predict everything. And I think that's the beauty of sports is just like you never know what's gonna happen, even though it can be frustrating and like you think that this is what's gonna happen and then you're wrong. But like it just makes life more exciting in a way. So that's it's good to check yourself in that way too. And I think we try to do that as well.
In baseball,
Absolutely.
if you bat 300, you're in the Hall of Fame, right? So, and as long as you're not talking about sports bets and you're batting 300, you're doing decent. If we're talking about betting and you're not hitting 300, then we have a serious issue.
Yeah, I mean, I've started last year. I kind of did it privately, and this year I've been a little bit more public about it. I do the ESPN Pick'ems, which are free. It's like their streak feature on the ESPN Fantasy app, and I've got a above 600 record right now. And even still, I feel like sometimes it's like, man, you never know week in and week out what's going to happen. And I don't think anybody
Absolutely.
does. There's very few Hall of Fame bettors out there, and that's why the guys who have made it big in Vegas, they write books. There's Netflix shows about them. It's because it's hard. It is not easy to know what's going to happen. That's why when Mattress Mac goes out there and he puts down $1 million bet on a team to win the World Series a year in
Everyone.
advance, it's insane. It's because even if the Astros are a good team and everybody believes they're probably going to be one of the final teams standing, it's hard to make a take and sit by it and sit in the pocket all year long through the ups and the downs. And I just think that it's really admirable when people are willing to admit they're wrong. And I've seen creators like all the time, especially as of late. Pat McAfee is an awesome example of, I think, what you want to be as a creator in so many different ways. Even though there's a lot of people who don't like his style, he's transparent, he's authentic. He is always willing to give the athlete the benefit of the doubt and the team the benefit of the doubt. He's a former player. He gets it. He's been in the locker room. And he'll always be the first one to say, hey, that's my pick. But he'll come back on Monday and say, yeah, we went 7-9 with our picks, or 9-7. Wasn't the worst record, wasn't the best record. We're going to get them right. We're going to get them wrong. And I think transparency just in everything, especially in 2023, is really important. And I think people value it more than ever when we're not sure if everyone's always being authentic.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's
quick note on Pat McAfee. Just one of my favorite podcasters, just entertainment personalities in general. And I just think the work that he's done and the way that he's done it is just something like to aspire to do. And I like, for me, that's kind of when Chandler brought it up to me, like, hey, you want to start a podcast? Like let's kind of do this thing. That's one of the people that I looked at and I was like, I want to be on that. Like, I want to get it to that level. I want to, like, I aspire to be like that. So yeah, like Pat McAfee for me, you mentioning it just kind of, brought it up in my head. But yeah, that's definitely like someone to aspire to be because he is just transparent. He's honest. He's always willing to give the athletes the benefit of the doubt. And I think that's because he was an athlete himself, but like it's a good way to it's a good person to to look up to on that level.
absolutely.
A lot of people don't understand his style. I've been watching, funny story. I'm a huge Pat McAfee fan. I don't think my show in terms of the style is similar to his, but make no mistake, Pat McAfee was 100% my inspiration for starting the show. I started watching him regularly, like I'm talking every single day, probably midway through my senior year of high school. So I wasn't a day one fan of his, but once I found out about him and his crew and Boston Connor and Ty Schmidt and Tone Diggs and those boys in the back, I was hooked. I love the energy that they bring. I love the fandom that kind of spills out. I'm one of those people that, kind of unfortunate for me, but it also works for my style. I've never been like a hardcore fan of teams. I'm from Miami. I'm not a Dolphins fan. I've always found that I root for players, I root for coaches, I root for GMs, which is kind of nerdy, but I love certain situations and I love players and people and coaches who do it correctly. But understanding like they've got that fandom and, even Boston Connor being a Patriots fan and Ty Schmidt being a Packers fan and Tone being a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, like these old school franchises that have either had really long periods of greatness or really long periods of, just a dull situation. Like even Foxy, who's just in the back, a Detroit Lions fan, who's finally getting to enjoy his run as a Detroit Lions fan.
Jaguars and Lions fans are rejoicing right now.
It's awesome to watch that. And I think those guys have really paved the path. And I think so many people were critical of him when he went to ESPN because it was in the midst of all the cuts happening. And he said something on his show that, I follow him on Instagram and he actually followed me back a couple of weeks ago. And it was like a hallelujah moment for me. It was like my hero following me back. That's awesome. And to me, he said it on the show. I don't even think he realizes it yet. He's like, I just wish people would see the flip side of it. Like, we're showing reporters and anchors who have always been tied to networks or tied to teams, hey, you can create something on your own. If you build it, people will come, and you can arguably be even more successful and more happy and doing what you love in your own way if you just decide to do it your own way. And he was saying something like, I wish people would be inspired by the show rather than hating on it. If Pat ever sees this, I was incredibly inspired by his show. It inspired me to start my own program in the living room of my own home. And I think it has made me exponentially better as a broadcaster. And I know that whether it's a year from now or 10 years from now, what I've built on this show, whether it's the audience or the ability, it's going to pay off dividends big time in the future. And so I appreciate him for showing people there is an alternate path. And he's one of those guys that is not the old school sports media guys, but he certainly has made it. And yeah, he's a huge inspiration of mine. So glad to hear that he's been in the back of your minds as well when you guys are trying to do your own thing.
Absolutely. I have two things for that. Number one, and you mentioned it before, is like big inspirations, right? One, my biggest inspiration growing up was always Stuart Scott. That was my number one guy. Like, he's the reason why I wanted to ever pick up a microphone, ever do anything. I actually have two cards that like are Stuart Scott cards. His SB speech 2014. Literally watched that to inspire myself. I love that man. Growing up, it was different for us, at least, because there was always the classic Sports Center or like CBS Sports. You have the normal guys. And then there was a guy in Canada that came out, and David will probably know this guy. His name was Caddy. And he eventually came to ESPN because he did so well in Canada. And he was like the first person that I always saw that was actually having these interviews with athletes when they were in their environment. It wasn't in the broadcast booth. It wasn't in the studio. He's going to fields. He's going to hockey rinks. He's sitting down with these people, with these players in their atmosphere. Because when you take an athlete and you put them in a shirt and tie and button them up, they feel uncomfortable. They're squirming, right? I forgot who the head coach was for the Giants a couple years back. Who was it, David, the head coach that sat down? He was a beady eyes guy.
You're talking about for the Jets?
Or Jets, yes. I forget his name right now. I
can't remember his name.
He went to the Giants after.
Adam Gase.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he just looks so uncomfortable. These people need to be in their environment, right? So it's different when you have these athletes on the field or something like that. And that's what we're getting now. And Caddy was the first guy that I ever saw really do that with athletes. And now you're seeing that with more Pat McAfee. You're seeing that more even with Chris Sims. He'll go out and talk to athletes, and he's more on the athlete side, at least to the NFL. And that's where we're moving to, right? Is that we can't look at these people like they are a statue or they are just money pit. We got to look at these people like they're people. That's the biggest thing I told David from start. Like, if we're going to interview people, we're going to talk to them about who they are as an athlete, who they are as a person, because that's who I care about. With that, you kind of said like you weren't a fan of teams. And I was kind of thinking about this. You grew up in Miami. You're from Miami, born and raised. And obviously LeBron had a big impact in Miami. Were you a bigger basketball fan at all growing up at all? Like, what was your main sport growing up?
When I was growing up during that LeBron era, it was definitely basketball. Basketball was my life. I remember being on cruises in the summer when LeBron James was playing with the Miami Heat, and the cruise literally changing their entire itinerary and going over the loudspeaker like on the first day when they're addressing you guys hey, if anything goes south, here's where the lifeboats are. And oh, by the way, we know the Miami Heat are playing in Game 4 of the NBA Finals on Tuesday of our 7-day cruise. We're going to shut down the main floor of the cruise, the lobby indoors. We're going to put the game on the theater, on the projector, and you guys are welcome to come. And I just remember seeing literally thousands of people, maybe I'd say more than half that cruise jammed into that lobby-ish area, that like arena part of the cruise in the middle of their vacation, taking a moment to stop and say, no, we want to watch LeBron James and the Miami Heat against the San Antonio Spurs. And to me, that demonstrated the power of sports. And I think because of the power that was behind it in my own hometown of Miami, yeah, I'd say basketball probably initially was I leaned towards that. But I always loved football. And this is going to sound crazy for people who don't know me. I'm from Miami. Miami Dolphins fans do not like Tom Brady to the Patriots. I loved Tom Brady growing up. I thought he was the greatest of all time when he had 3 rings. I thought he was so cool watching him grow up. So many people disliked him. And whenever you would see the games, even early in his career when commentators were critical of him, still calling him a system quarterback on TV, I remember being 10, 11, 12 years old wearing a Tom Brady jersey from when I was little that I have until this day that was a youth extra small, hearing that and just in spite of the noise, in spite of the commentators and fans and bettors who did not want to see Tom Brady win an AFC championship in the divisional round, in December games, in February games, watching him go out there and just tear it up and prove why he was the best in the league and why he is the greatest of all time. So I had inspirations in different sports, but to me, growing up, it was Tom Brady and LeBron James. I loved those guys, and they are definitely not solely responsible, but majority responsible for why I love sports to this day, is understanding what they can do for a city with their talent.
Yeah, then I love that answer, because the reason why I was going to say is I see this in a younger generation, like even a little bit younger than like I am now, is that there's not necessarily team fans anymore, which there are obviously hardcore fans. That's an older generation thing. Younger generation, with how much movement there is for players, like especially NBA, it's a carousel. I don't know who's on what teams anymore. Like it's just crazy every single year, right? You have to be a fan of the player, right? It's because you don't know how the players are understanding their worth, and they're going to new teams to show their worth. So you now have to be invested in that person rather than being invested into the Miami Heat. Because yeah, they might have Jimmy Butler who was knocking for Dame Lillard, but it didn't happen. So if you're a Dame Lillard fan, now you're a Bucks fan. And that's just how it is, right? You have to commit yourself to a player and follow that player rather than trying to I live in Orlando. I wanted to go to a LeBron James Orlando Magic game this year. Those tickets are damn expensive because he plays for the Lakers and it's LeBron James. He's getting older. No one knows when he's going to go, like how much longer he's going to go, right? Because everyone gravitates to LeBron. Everyone gravitates to like Tom Brady. Buccaneers tickets skyrocket the moment he gets here. The moment he's gone, those tickets are dirt cheap again. So it's just so amazing what players can do. And you really do have to be a fan of those players now, rather than for so long it was you have to die with your team. Back when there wasn't free agency in the NFL in the 80s, right? You had to stick with your team no matter what happened. So
yeah, and just for that, I do really appreciate that with like, and seeing that the NFL is kind of moving towards that. It just seems to give the players more value, and I really, as like someone who's played before, I really love seeing the players get more value, like, and have more worth rather than like being disposable, right? Because it's the team. Like it's a team. It's always been the team that's more important. It's always been, and which is true. Like obviously, if you want to win in any kind of team sport, the team's gonna come before everyone else. But when it comes to putting your body on the line, it's still you that's doing that. And so like getting your money's worth and your value paid out to you as a player is really like something that I love seeing, and I think it's great that we're moving towards that rather than sticking to the old guard a little bit on that.
Absolutely. I mean, I think players have built a platform for them in the last 10 years that is going to set them up big time. And you see it in CBAs now in the NBA and in the NFL. You're going to see it again coming up pretty soon. Players have never had more power. If players don't want a bye week, it'll get taken. Or if they want a bye week, like the NFL right now wants to add an extra game, well, we want a bye week, and they're not going to budge on it. Even in the NFL, which I think has always had less power, you see it in the NBA. The most recent NBA CBA that like the news broke in the summer, I was in shock. I was at a mall when I remember getting the Twitter notification. Oh yeah, the NBA CBA now allows players to use recreational marijuana, and it also allows them to invest in sports gambling companies and to have partnerships with them, which is incredible. I mean, with the taboo that people thought there will never be a pro sports team in Vegas, there will never be an NFL team or an NBA team or a hockey team or anything like that, and players will never be able to partner with sports books. How things have changed, and you still see players get in trouble for it in the NFL, but I think that might change with the upcoming CBA. Yeah, I mean, players have never had more power in terms of what they can do in CBAs. They're getting a higher cut of their jersey sales more than ever. And because of social media and their independent power, there's a reason that Travis Kelce and Jason Kelce decided to start a podcast a year ago. There's a reason that Pat McAfee decided to start a podcast and walk away from the NFL earlier than most people thought. There's a reason that all of these guys, there's a reason that LeBron James, who has probably the most busy schedule of any NBA player between what he does on the court, off the court for his body, and in the studio from a production standpoint, there's a reason that he takes time out of his day and his week to conduct The Shop on HBO. Players have realized no matter how big, no matter how small, whether you're a great player or a mediocre player, if I can create my own platform while I'm playing and really utilize the power of TV and viewership while you're still playing the game, I can make that audience who loves the NFL or who loves a team or who loves just general football, I can make them love me, and I can make them want to tune in to watch me. And with that comes ad revenue and building a platform. And they realize, hey, the biggest bag you can get now as an athlete isn't necessarily going to always be on the field. And I think Pat McAfee proved that. I know he wasn't a quarterback. He was a punter, so it's easier to say now. But the guy, Travis Kelce and Jason Kelce together have made well over $100 million. This podcast, with everything that's going on in Travis's dating life and with what they did in the Super Bowl last year and the amount of people that tuned in to watch them, and in turn, it was almost like the Super Bowl felt like a commercial for New Heights and for Mama Kelce. The bag that they make from that podcast could very well be bigger than the combined $100 million that they've made in the NFL. And I know a casual fan might find that to be crazy. That longevity of that podcast, they're going to be able to do that podcast a lot longer than they'll be able to play in the NFL. That podcast don't wear you out in your knees and your joints. Nope. It doesn't break bones.
There's a reason why Troy Aikman is on Sunday afternoon still, y'all. He's still able to do it. He's just standing there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you see it. So props to players for building such an incredible platform for themselves. And I think it just really opens the door for a lot of guys in the future who say, you know what? I want to be able to do this while I'm playing. Even Draymond Green, who might have seen taboo. He was doing it during the NBA Finals, during the playoffs. People didn't like it. And similar to his aura and his personality, he said, I don't care. I'm going to continue to put out my podcast. I'm going to continue to have guests on. And when they won 2 years ago and last year when they fell short, it didn't matter. It benefits him at the end of the day. And it's just another point in his journey as an athlete and building his own company outside of sports. So I think athletes realize win or loss, you can win off the field.
Absolutely. And that is a power that we're using now going into the NFL. You kind of mentioned it before, the bye week. I think truly a great thing that I would love as a fan and would be a great idea would be if the NFL had a 20-week season. Crazy, right? 20 weeks. 2 bye weeks, 18 games. You have to have a bye week within your first 10 weeks, and you have to have a bye week in your last 10 weeks. It is still more recovery time for the athlete itself, but you still get 2 bye weeks. You still get 20 weeks of football. I think that is something that would be great for the sport. That's my personal take on it because I don't want the NFL season to end ever. I love the NFL. That's my main sport. That is the hill I'm going to die on. But we're going to say, David, and we'll jump into some storylines and some fake and real teams, the NFL, after this, too.
David, do you want to go first on this? Because I have a take on the 20-week season, I think.
Okay, so this is one thing that me and Chandler did not agree on. I feel like as a running back, no thank you. I would rather have 16 games or 17 games and just stay there because I think 2 extra games basically in turn, and then add the playoffs as well, in turn means maybe my lifespan as a running back in the NFL cuts down to like 5 years instead of the 7 years that you would be looking at. So for me, not something I would really love.
The NFL season is awesome. As fans, we never want it to end, right? But I think one of the most valuable things about the NBA, when you look at baseball and the MLB and you look at the NBA, we're not in that load management phase yet. If we go to a 20-week regular season, I'm assuming 18 games with 2 bye weeks is what we're talking. The value of having an Iron Man, which was so rewarded for so long, the Russell Wilsons, the Drew Brees, the Eli Mannings of the world, that's going to start to disappear. And that's what people love about football, is that you go to a game, unless your player is like, he's on IR, there's going to be a chance that he's day-to-day, that he's questionable before game time, but there's a chance that your player is going to play. And that speaks to the toughness in the NFL, but also the limited amount of time that they have to make an impact. There's not 82 games in the NFL. So they're not going to take a night off because they know, hey, if I take a night off, even if I'm not feeling 100%, the team's going to jip me down the line in 2 years when I need to renegotiate my contract. And they're going to say, hey, you missed, let's say 10 games. If you know that you didn't put your total effort into playing in 3 of those games matter, because the NFL is, people talk about it all the time, especially players. It's game checks. It's not like people who are working as regular employees who are getting direct deposit every 2 weeks. It's game checks. You are paid for your service, for your duty, for your job. And I think between the postseason and now, I know they want to go international. I think the NFL might be going down a route that is, it's the route that they've been able to avoid that other sports have taken, like the NFL, like the NBA, like the MLB. That maybe, I think it's the reason the fans love the NFL, is because we know it's not going to be around forever. It's 4.5 months of the year. Our team might not make it to the postseason. Let's cherish these 16, 17 games. I think if you add to it, you start not to reward and recognize Ironmans in the sport. I think injuries will certainly go up. Running backs, positions that are just driving their knees into the ground week in and week out, you're going to see careers and longevities cut real short if you start doing that, no matter how good modern medicine is.
NFL is getting too big for itself. That's the issue. Running backs, we don't see the one back running back anymore, right? You have to have a plethora. It's not a third down back anymore. You don't hear that anymore. You hear the running back room. So they're already moving away from it. The reason why 18 games personally I think would work was, to me, that is more rest. You're going 17 weeks, you only get 1 week off, right? If you throw an extra game in there, yes, but you're getting that extra week of rest, which could make a difference. Now, Iron Man, I get that. You have these quarterbacks that have been playing for so long. I personally think we're moving away from that anyways. I truly look at the way like it's going on is that it's not, I'm watching the top wide receivers, 2 plays on, 1 play off. Pass rushers, you have a third down pass rusher. It's not like what it was 5 years ago even, right? There are true squad changes now. I think by the end of 3-4 years now, the 53-man rosters probably have to go higher up too, because they're going to be rotating more and more of these players. And also the talent is getting better each year. If you're looking at now, college players again, NIL deals, which means their performance is going to go up. But here nor there, regardless, I want us to get some time in so we can do some other parts of the show. I think
David and I were genuinely concerned about the players in the 20 games.
Yeah.
And you know what? That's true. I agree.
I'm thinking about the O-line too. The O-line doesn't get subbed out.
Let's be honest here. I think we've all seen the memes on Twitter whenever people start saying, oh, I wish there was a 30-week NFL season. It's like players by week 30-something, and it's like...
Also, the other part of it...
Going through the roof. Yeah.
The other part of it is you're looking at revenue for that time. Your revenue is going to go up for those longer weeks. So those contracts, the contracts will go up, will go for the players, as well as international games. You know how much money they make on international games? It's not even funny.
But I think you can spread that out and make, like, let's say if you wanted to do something like that, you can have more teams. You can do an international. You can have international.
It's gonna happen with the Jaguars winning
games,
2
right?
weeks. With the Jaguars winning back-to-back weeks, we'll have a team in London within the next 5 years. Absolutely, will happen.
I think it does make sense because it'll give you at least 1 extra game, if that. And so that's just something that will it
offset itself.
So I don't think necessarily adding more games will help anything, but I think adding more teams could help, and kind of the NFL is obviously trying to have its like spread out its market and kind of grow its market a little bit. If it's for if it's for revenue purposes, you can always put more teams in different cities. That's going to be different markets to capture now. And so for me, you don't have to necessarily add more games to get to where the NFL wants to be. I just think it is a lot for
17 games on a weekend is tough,
so
though. I'm not gonna lie. We gotta start playing on Fridays or Saturdays too, because that 1 o'clock window is crazy.
I think the exchange will end up being you get rid of 2 preseason games. There's 4. They're kind of useless. Owners have always said, I think privately, and I think some of them publicly, we'd rather have 2 preseason games, 1 home, 1 away, because that 1 home game, the fans will pack it in. You can charge a little bit more for ticket prices. You make it a little bit more of an event. Having 4 preseason games, 2 home, 2 away, it's hard for fans to feel like it matters because the players themselves are like, we're going to take this off. Starting quarterbacks are not playing. Offensive line is even playing. Your elite pass rusher, your wide receiver 1, they're all on the sidelines. If they're playing 1 series. So if there's any exchange that has to be made in the CBA, it would probably be getting rid of the 2 preseason games in order to get it done.
Yeah.
Hey, last thing on that, it would actually also help with the injuries because you always notice at the start of the year, lots of starting players are getting injured. They're getting hamstrings, all the injuries that come with not playing for a really long time at a very intense level. So if you're only having 2 preseason games, guys are playing half the game, maybe more than half the game, and then they're moving into the season, and you're seeing them not get injured as much. And I think that's something that the NFL it's definitely going to have to move to because I think it's just better for the game in general, and we'll see less injuries that way.
I have a hot take, and you guys are gonna hate me for this. I personally believe that no preseason would cause more injuries, and this is why.
Yeah,
you're going from when you have preseason, you go 0, 33, 66, 100, right? If you're going from training camp, especially in Florida, where it's 100 degrees every single week, you're going to go from 0 to 100. And your body's not going to be ready for that first Sunday where you're like, oh shit, our percentage is we have to win 1 of 17 games. Every game matters, like we're saying. Load management is not a thing. You are going to go and tear an Achilles, tear a hamstring. You're going to get hurt. It's the first week is sloppy. The second week's sloppy. It was this year. In my opinion, the first couple of weeks of the NFL were pretty sloppy. Now we're getting in the swing of things. People are a little bit more comfortable. We're getting into the full motion. But if you have no preseason, I know we all hate it, but we need to at least have 1 or 2 games where these players can get some game reps where they go, okay, we can't just go out there and I'm 23 years old and I can sprint like I have been, because you're going to be out there and you're going to be on the sideline like you're going to notice.
Yeah, I think 4 weeks is too much.
Mhm.
No preseason is too little. I think that would be an extreme, and I agree with you
I
there.
think
I think you need time to get adjusted, and it's not abnormal. We have spring training in baseball. We have NBA summer league in the NBA, and we also have a version of preseason now that's happening right now where it's like, okay, we're getting our footing. I think that period of, hey, getting back in game shape is important. I just don't think 4 games is the answer. I also don't think 0 games is the answer. I think that you're absolutely right. It would be detrimental, and it would be going 0 to 100. It would be going from 6 to 12 pretty much. It's a weird turnaround.
Yeah.
If you decide to go all in after being just cold turkey, kind of just warming up. So yeah, for sure. Yeah. No preseason would be a bad move.
Even 1 or 2 games, it's a hard line to play with. I feel like we want more, but we don't know what more is, and it's going to take a few years for us practicing to get that full ready to go week 1 that we really want to see. We were going to do storylines. I don't want to waste time on that. I feel like we've gone over as much as we can in the NFL. I want to get to something a little bit different. It is the fill in the blank. We'll dive deep into this, and I did a little bit different this time. David, I'm sorry. We usually do football stuff. I kind of mixed in everything. Just go.
All good.
All right. So
I watch everything. You know this. I'm good.
The first one is blank has the best playoffs of any sport.
This year?
Any sport. Just any sport. Watching TV as a fan, what sport has the best playoffs? So blank has the best playoffs of any sport.
Okay.
It's the NFL. To me, it's the NFL is king. And I love the magical October baseball. I love the NBA finals. But I think to me, the NFL, it's 1 game to win it. You're not going to have another opportunity. The way that it's marketed, the way that the players, the coaches, the fans are all in. They know what you can't make any excuses. Oh, tonight wasn't my night. I was having a slump. No. You have one chance. You prepare all week for it. It's win or go home. And I think it's the reason. I think fans tell you how many people are tuning into NBA Finals games. I think the highest rated ones per game are like 17 million, 9 million. I could be giving the NBA more credit
I
than
think you are
is due.
actually.
Maybe, those numbers have gone down in recent years. The NFL, we see the postseason, the NFC Championship, the divisional round, 50 million people, 70 million people, 80, 100 million people. It's because everybody knows what's on the line. And I think the magic of December football and hearing Al Michaels or hearing those old voices that we love who have been there forever, that is the best feeling in the world as a fan, as a player. You know what's at stake. You understand the magnitude of the moment. It's got to be the NFL for me.
Okay, I'm going to throw a curveball at you, and I'm going to go with March Madness. I think March Madness has, as far
the
as
exact
playoffs
same
go,
thing. It's the exact same thing. You're got it.
It's the exact same thing. It's just I don't know. For me, March Madness just is always been. It's always something crazy. There's never a boring March Madness, season or whatever. It's always
Tournament.
Some upsets. There's always or tournament. There's always an upset. There's always intrigue. There's always big stars, big plays, and it's just, to me, that's where I go to. Even though I'm a football guy, I still will tune into March Madness every year, regardless of what's going on, and I always interact with it as well. And so I find that to be, to me, that's where I'd go.
That's a good one.
The unpredictability of it, I can understand that. Yeah. March Madness is awesome.
I have a different one as well, and this is for intensity of the game. This is the best game you will get, and honestly, hockey. Playoff hockey is a whole different ball game because yes, it is a best of 7 series, but every goal matters. Like if you're down 2-0 in the final 2 minutes, there's no way of coming back, right? It is just like the intensity, and these guys are going as hard as they can for 60 minutes. It is insane to watch. Like I am not even a big hockey fan at all. I just lived in Canada for 10 years. I will represent the Edmonton Oilers, and maybe that's why, because they have been in some crazy games the past couple years. It is a great sport to watch in the playoffs, and it's football is the right answer for me too, but I want to give credit to playoff hockey as a whole different level of athletic ability.
Yeah, as an Edmonton Oiler fan and someone who lives in Edmonton, playoff hockey is a different breed for sure. And it's just, like living in the city and seeing the impact of playoff hockey is unmatched as far as I've seen it. And that's just I guess anecdotal proof, but like that, as far as I know it, playoff hockey is just something different. I'm sure in the NFL it's different in like cities like Buffalo and like Pittsburgh and all that. It's the same feel. But I gotta agree with you on that one. Playoff hockey, amazing.
You guys ready for the next one?
All right, let's hear it.
All right. Messi's signing with Miami CF is the biggest signing in the U.S. since blank. It can be trade. It can be free agent signing. It's the biggest signing since blank.
Biggest signing since LeBron in the same city of Miami, I think. And exactly. I think Messi going to Inter Miami CF, it was a world-shifting moment. I was so glad to be a fly on the wall when it happened because I do work with the organization. And I think everybody in Miami, between the hype of it happening, the same thing that happened with LeBron, like the murmurs of this could be real to it becoming real. I think the impact of that, I know it was bigger than the LeBron signing globally. But if you had to date back to it's the biggest since, it would have to be LeBron. Because I love Tom Brady signing with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but that's just not the same. Like, even though it was groundbreaking, he had been with the same team for 17, 18 years, and he was totally moving to a different culture, a different place, different division, different conference entirely. The LeBron move to Miami symbolized across the world and really in the NBA, that was player empowerment at its finest. If you look back at the history of player empowerment, and we do an E60 on it, or there's a 30 for 30 on it, whatever the case may be,
the LeBron James
to Miami moves. Yeah, the LeBron James moving to Miami is one of the big ones because it's your hometown team drafted you. You were the chosen one. You were one of the greatest players ever. They expected you to be as great, if not greater than Michael Jordan. And you decided what's best for me in my career is I appreciate you taking a chance on me and giving me an opportunity. I am not going to extend that olive branch your way, though. And I'm going to change things up. I'm going to do it my way. and I think I can win here, and maybe I'll come back. And he eventually did. And it's a full circle moment that, to me, no matter where you stand on the GOAT debate, that LeBron to Miami to then come back, man, that changed sports forever in a way that I don't think fans realize.
I think definitely in terms of impact, the LeBron to Miami is just unbeatable in terms of the, like you said, like the impact of it all. It just it's a shift in all of sports basically from team based to player based, and that was like when players started to figure out like, hey, I am the brand at this point. Like the teams need to fight for me, and I like the fans come to see me, not the team. And I know it's hard again, like it's always hard for me to say me, but like it is a great thing for it was a great thing for player empowerment. Like it, and so yeah, and I think in a way LeBron crawled so Messi could walk, and so that's kind of like how I see it. But yeah, like I do agree with you. I think that's like that. Tom's can't be isn't the same. It's a little different in my view, but like yeah, I think LeBron to Miami was unmatched.
I don't think people realize that Messi brought his entire crew from Barcelona too. I don't think that's really clicked with everyone that like Jordi Alba and like all these players from those great Barcelona days are now also in Miami. So
I think you realize that as much as we love soccer as soccer fans, most of the United States, especially outside of Miami, which has a huge Hispanic and European population down here, people in the United States just don't love soccer that much. And, ratings have gone up exponentially. I think people care more right now about the MLS than ever. But the reality is a lot of people didn't follow Messi's days with Barcelona if you weren't a diehard Messi or soccer fan. So asking the average hockey or American football or hardcore baseball, old school blue blood baseball fan to say, hey, you know about Lionel Messi, that guy who's been absolutely cooking overseas in the World Cup and international games for the past 15 years? Well, he's coming over here and he's bringing all his friends. That feels like most people have said, oh, that's great. Maybe I'll watch a game and maybe I won't. But yeah, people just don't understand. He pulled the LeBron, very much so. He not only did he come, but he made sure that all his friends were going to come along with him too.
Absolutely.
Yep,
Yeah.
Mr. Jones, Cleveland boy that wins every single championship with LeBron. Before I get to the last one, I have another one. I agree. The Messi, LeBron, those are the two biggest one. Another impact, if you do watch soccer, Ibrahimovic going to LAFC, and
I thought about it.
The impact of scoring the hat trick his first game with the absolute piss missile from half, like that was great. If you're a soccer fan, was a great play, but with just the personality that Ibrahimovic brings is just crazy. Like the fact that Ted Lasso has a character that's based off of him too. People don't really get that. That was another good one. The last one I have for you.
I thought about it. I thought about the Ibrahimovic, and then I said I'd be remiss in my mind if I didn't mention David Beckham to the MLS, because that's really what, talk about player empowerment, told the league, hey, besides the contract you're going to give me, I want the option to be able to purchase a team, which has now come full circle and resulted in the greatest soccer player of all time, undisputedly so in my mind, coming to the United States because of a pro player empowerment move and a chance that the MLS took 15 years ago. I mean, you couldn't write a better book or a better story or a better script than that.
Thank you for knowing that, because a lot of people don't know that Beckham put that in his contract, that he had the first bid on a new organization in the MLS, and just like you said, full circle. Now we have Messi in the United States. It's crazy. Almost could have had Ronaldo if we would have known how that gone. Saudi Arabia that's a whole different ball game now. Last one I have for you guys: blank is the hardest championship to win in professional sports. So what is the hardest league to win in professional sports?
It's football.
Absolutely.
It's the NFL. Baseball, you can load up. It's a soft salary cap league, or maybe not even. There is not a salary cap. There's no luxury tax. There is in the NBA. The NBA, you can build a super team pretty easily in 2023. It starts off with a DM, a FaceTime phone call, and you can get 3 stars to sit their way out and force an organization to move them to the same place. The MLB it's about going to the team with the highest bidder. In the NFL, it is so hard with a hard salary cap, with the amount of changes, with the amount of changes that we go through as fans and that teams go through over the course of a 17-week regular season. to stay healthy enough to make it to the postseason. We see back-to-back NBA championships pretty frequently. We see the same 4 or 5 teams in the conversation every single year for the past 10 years. In baseball and the NFL, you go from thinking the Phillies are it, to the 49ers are it, to the Patriots are it, to the Rams are it, and then the Rams are out of the conversation, and the Rams are back in a couple of years later, and now the Miami Dolphins might be in the mix. It is a very different animal, and it is so hard to win because it requires the most amount of players and people to be on the same page, a 53-man roster, about 10 or 11 head coach, assistants. The general manager has to be all in. The owner has to understand, hey, we're not taking an off year here. You're going to spend the full $225 million of this hard cap because we're trying to go all in this year. It's I think you see it when you look back. It's hard to find back-to-back champions in the NFL, and I don't think there's ever been a three-peat. I think that speaks to the difficulty of it.
Dallas Cowboys.
Really?
I think.
Right? Wasn't it Cowboys, if I'm not mistaken?
I think it was only 1 3
92 to 95, if I'm not mistaken. In that time zone.
And
they're still milking it.
And they are holding on to that same
Woo, Jerry Jones. Woo. Yeah, we won't get into that.
So two things. I agree with you completely. I know that it's just been us agreeing the whole time, but for me, the biggest thing is getting 53 people or 54 guys to think on the same level and to not get selfish and to think I'm doing this for the team, not just for myself. You can get 6 or 7 stars, superstars even on your team. The Philadelphia Eagles, the best example of this. They've got stars all over the team and they got to the Super Bowl and still couldn't win it. So for me, it is just one of those things that you have to buy in from day one till the very final game, and you have to be all in. You can't take days off. There's no sick days. There's nothing like that. It just requires the most amount of sacrifice, and there's 32 other teams making the exact same sacrifices you are, and so it's just incredibly difficult. I think it is definitely one of the toughest sport or championships to win by far. I think it is the toughest championship to win. I think the next closest would probably be hockey because the playing levels are all pretty similar. So it's very hard to be worlds better than the next best guy. So like for hockey, you think Connor McDavid, best player in the league, like unanimously for the most part. I think there are players right below him who on their very best day, you could say are better than Connor McDavid. And so that's another sport that you can look at. But basketball is just like there's just guys. Like there's just guys, and if you get a good amount of guys on the team, you can win 3 championships in a row if you really commit to it.
Yeah. I agree with the NHL part. And the reason why those two are the biggest ones would just be because when we talk about GOATs, right? When you talk about the greatest of all time, you'll say Tom Brady, you'll say LeBron James or Michael Jordan, right? Those are the players, right? But in NFL, to be called a GOAT is a whole different level, in my opinion, than the NBA. Because NBA, it's just 5 guys working together. To be known as the greatest of all time in football, do you know how many different variables there are? How much short of time you have? Like, it is so different to go, like, that is the greatest quarterback. That quarterback won 7 Super Bowls. Bill Russell won 11 championships within the NBA over his entire career, right? That's incredible. Granted, there was only like 6 teams in the league at the time, but whatever, we won't get into that. But like when you really think about like football is like to be called the top echelon, to be called the best receiver, to be called best quarterback, that's crazy because you don't have best point guard. You do, but it's not the same conversation, right? You have the best NBA players of all time. You have the best player at your position in football, and that's why it's completely different. So that's why I agree with when it comes to NFL. Just the every game matters. Calais Campbell said it back in the day. I think it was like 3 or 4 years ago. Football easily. Oh my God. Like every game matters. NBA, you can have an off night for 3 games and still win a series. Baseball, same idea. A best of 7 series, you can have 3 shitty games and still win. NFL, you can't have a crappy 3 quarters and win a football game. Very rarely does that happen. So I agree with the NFL on that one.
This this take is not even that well thought out in my mind, so it's probably going to sound like I'm rambling here. But I think the difficulty is obvious when you look at leagues and like who people think is the GOAT. Like in baseball and the MLB, we don't necessarily think it's the hardest championship to win, nor do we think it's like the hardest legacy to build in financially. People like nobody has a real GOAT in baseball. When you look at baseball, people are like, well, Derek Jeter was my favorite, or A-Rod was my favorite, but Babe Ruth is the GOAT, or Mickey Mantle. Like, you're going back a long time. And the NBA, it's the same thing where it's like, there's a lot of emotion and vitriol where it's like, is it LeBron? Is it Jordan? Is it Kareem? Who is it? And old school fans don't agree with new school fans. There's this like division. In football, it feels like the game has changed a lot, and older fans and older players may say it, but there's still a conversation here of, most people think Tom Brady is the GOAT, but everybody's willing to say, young and old, hey, if Mahomes plays for 20 years and he wins 6 or 7 championships, there's a chance that we'd be willing to embrace him as the GOAT. You see that in football, and it feels like everybody respects the difficulty and the degree of hard work that it takes to get to that point. In other sports, it feels like it goes by the wayside, and even older players and young players don't see eye to eye, and they don't respect the accomplishments the way that people universally respect an MVP or a Super Bowl in the NFL. And the NBA, it's well, man, there's no hand checking now. And the MLB, it's like, oh, well, we went through a steroid era.
Juice ball now. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's totally different. I think when you look at the respect, people, young and old, players, broadcasters, respect football players from all eras. You don't see that in other sports.
Yeah. I also think, really quickly, that the fact that it's the standard for the GOAT conversation is so high that 7 championships is the standard. And so and we will never get to get to that point is almost probably never going to happen. The closest we have right now is Patrick Mahomes. I'm going to assume he's not going to get there. That is just so insane and crazy to do that. And in any other league to do that, probably you could see it happening. Gretzky won how many? 6 or I think 6 or 5 or 6.
I want to say 5.
5.
Want to say 5.
Yeah, 5.
I think
Jordan
Messier actually
won
won more, didn't he?
Yeah, and so it's just just to have that. And the thing that I respect is that in the NFL, hate him or love him, everyone knows that Tom Brady's the GOAT. And we all know why he's the GOAT, because we know how difficult it is to do what he did. In any other sport, LeBron, he's done what he's done. He's put up numbers, but still people are like, it's Jordan, or people are like, it's LeBron. And so for I don't know. And I think I'm in the same boat here. It's not really well thought out yet, but the level of difficulty shows from how people treat the GOATs of the league. I think
I can button this
Dave,
up
we're
for
on
you
the same
guys.
page.
I think I can button up for this. I think I kind of get what you guys are saying. Okay. This is the last thing I'll say. We'll end the show, whatever. All right. In the NBA, any basketball player can do a certain thing, right? A point guard can make a 3-pointer. Even a center today can make a 3-pointer. In football, a quarterback, that level of position and what they can do is a whole different ballgame. Quarterback is the hardest position in professional sports, to know what everyone is doing on the field, to do what you have to do, to be athletic enough, all in 3 seconds. Not like it's like a 20-minute game you're running back and forth. In 3 seconds, know where you need to put this ball. Know you have to have that edge rusher coming in. You need to be able to check down to see if you need to run the ball and kill the play. To do all of that in that quick of time is the hardest thing to do. Oh, and by the way, can you throw 50 yards while doing that? Can you throw it across a field sidearm? Because not many people in the world can do that. A lot of people in our world can make 3-point shots. Truly. The greatest of all time can dunk. But when it comes to football and quarterback, the level of preparation, and this isn't to knock NBA players at all, it's just a whole different mentality of like NBA, you can show up, throw some gym shoes on, and dominate pieces one-on-one. Football, the amount of studying, the amount of work, amount of effort has to go in is completely different. There's so many analytics, there's so many spots to it. I would say pitcher is probably the next thing that's also very difficult that we don't give credit to, or trying to hit a baseball is a whole different thing. But when it comes to basketball, you can lace them up. Quarterbacks can't just lace them up. It's a whole different level that you have when you're an NFL quarterback. I hope that kind
Appreciate that, Chandler.
Yeah, I don't know.
Chandler, Dave and I were like, we were trying to spitball here.
We're scrambling to find it. Absolutely.
I don't know if I even said that
really,
right, but I think that's
you
what
got
you
it.
mean.
Yeah.
You got that one. That's clip worthy right there.
For What's the Checkdown, I am Chandler. He is David with special guest Benjamin. Thank you so much for coming on today. It was a blast. We love it. Honestly, talking about your career, we wish you nothing the best. We know you're going to be up and coming, and honestly, going to blow up more than you already have. I already see it, but thank you for your time. We love to have you on anytime you have the opportunity.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. Chandler, Dave, you guys keep on killing it. I see the clips. I see the hard work. I appreciate what you guys are doing. Having conversations, it's important. And I think more than ever, it's valued in today's sports media landscape. Best of luck to you guys. I think you'll crush it too.